They hid my uniform and medals in those basement boxes, said it was to protect my memories. Captain Sarah Mitchell's voice was steady as she adjusted her service pin on her blazer lapel. What they were really hiding was me. In my own home, the home I'd paid off before my second tour. She leaned forward slightly, the morning light catching the silver in her dark hair. My son and his wife said the basement apartment was more manageable after my injury. What they meant was, I was more manageable down there, out of sight while they divided up my life from right above my head. Before we dive into this wild story, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This one's going to make your blood boil, but I promise the ending is worth it. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who got pushed aside. I spent 22 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, building bridges in war zones that most people couldn't find on a map. I had commanded units, managed million-dollar projects, and earned respect in places where American women were barely acknowledged. When I retired 5 years ago after a close call with an IED that left me with a titanium rod in my right leg and hearing loss in my left ear, I figured I'd earned my peace. The house in Portland had been my anchor during deployments, a 1920s craftsman with wood floors and a front porch where I'd imagined drinking coffee in my retirement. I'd bought it 15 years earlier when property values were still reasonable, made double payments whenever I could, and paid it off completely. 2 years before my medical retirement. It was the one thing I owned outright, my safety net. 3 bedrooms, a sunroom that I'd converted to a small library, and a yard with a magnolia tree that bloomed so beautifully each spring it made my heart ache. When I came home for good, the transition wasn't easy. Military to civilian life never is, but adding physical therapy and weekly VA appointments made it harder. Still, I was adjusting, finding my rhythm. I joined a veterans writing group, volunteered with a housing program for homeless female vets, and was slowly renovating the kitchen, one cabinet at a time, as my leg allowed. Then Justin, my only son, lost his tech job in Seattle. He and his wife Meredith needed a place to regroup, as they called it, just for a few months while they figured out their next steps. I hadn't lived with my son since he left for college 14 years earlier, but the house had plenty of room. And isn't that what mothers do? Make space when their children need it? It'll be great, Justin said when they arrived with a U-Haul and 3 oversized suitcases. Like a family compound. Meredith had nodded enthusiastically, her highlighted hair bouncing. We'll split the utilities 3 ways. It'll actually be cheaper for everyone. The first month was almost nice. Having people in the house again, the sounds of conversation. Someone else to cook with occasionally. Meredith set up her remote workstation in the smaller spare bedroom. Justin networked and applied for jobs. We ate dinner together most nights, watched movies on weekends. I gave them space. They respected mine. Then came the suggestions. Mom, don't you think the master bedroom is a lot to keep up with? Justin asked one morning as I was doing PT exercises in the living room. There's so much dusting, and those stairs can't be good for your leg. I had looked at him, confused. I manage fine. The stairs are actually good practice according to my physical therapist. Meredith had joined in, her voice gentle but insistent. We're just concerned, Sarah. After your last fall. That was 6 months ago, I'd interrupted. One misstep in the garden. Still, Justin had continued. We've been talking, and you know there's that garden-level apartment we could convert. The old den and storage area in the basement? It's got its own entrance. That half bath we could expand. You'd have privacy, no stairs to worry about. I'd dismissed it then, laughed it off. My son, always with the big ideas, but they didn't drop it. Each week, new reasons emerged why the basement made more sense for me. The upstairs was too hot in summer. The master bathroom tub was a falling hazard. The kitchen counters were too high for days when my leg was bothering me. We could renovate it, Meredith said over dinner one night. Make it really nice. Justin's cousin Eric is a contractor. He gave us a quote already. She'd pulled out her tablet, showing me designs for a mother-in-law suite with accessibility. Features. They'd planned this, without asking me, in my house. That's thoughtful, I'd said carefully, but unnecessary. I'm comfortable where I am. 2 weeks later, I came home from a 3-day veterans retreat to find a construction crew in my basement. Walls being framed, plumbing exposed, my storage boxes piled in the garage. "Surprise!" Meredith had exclaimed, hands clasped together, in excitement. "We signed the contract. Eric gave us a friends and family discount. We're covering the costs," Justin added quickly. "Consider it our investment in the property." I'd stood there, speechless, the weight of my duffel bag suddenly heavy on my shoulder. Investment in the property. Not my comfort, not my wishes. The property. "I didn't agree to this," I'd said finally. Justin's face had softened into that look. The one people give when they think you're being unreasonable, but they're trying to be patient. I'd seen it from doctors, from VA clerks, from bank tellers when my hands shook trying to count bills. "Mom, we're just trying to help. You've seemed overwhelmed lately." Overwhelmed. The word hung in the air like an accusation. I'd navigated Baghdad, during active combat, managed supply chains across international borders, led teams through impossible logistical challenges. But now I was overwhelmed by my own home. I didn't argue. Not then. Instead, I watched as my basement transformed over the next 6 weeks. A bedroom where my workshop had been. A kitchenette replacing storage shelves that had held Christmas decorations and camping gear. My boxes of military commendations, photo albums, and journals were organized into storage totes and tucked into the crawl space for safekeeping. All. While Justin and Meredith spoke about the resale value of the house in low tones when they thought I couldn't hear. My hearing loss was in the left ear, not both. Another detail they'd forgotten. The basement apartment was completed in early October. It was objectively nice. Good lighting, new appliances, a walk-in shower with grab bars that made me feel ancient at 54. But it wasn't my choice. It wasn't my space. "We'll move your things down tomorrow," Justin announced at dinner night the contractor finished. "Meredith's sister needs a place to stay for a while, so she'll take your old room." I set down my fork. "Her sister? In my bedroom?" Meredith jumped in. "Just for a few months. She's going through a divorce, and with the baby—" "Baby?" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "It's temporary," Justin soothed. "And this way. You won't have to worry about the noise. You know how you've been having trouble sleeping." The trouble sleeping had started when they'd moved in. When my routines had been disrupted, my space invaded inch by inch. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in my room, and looked around at the walls I'd painted myself, the windows that faced east so the morning light woke me naturally. This was my sanctuary. I'd earned it, paid for it in ways that went beyond the mortgage. But I also recognized the strategy unfolding. I'd seen it before with other veterans, especially women. The slow erosion of autonomy. The well-meaning help that became control. The assumption of incompetence despite evidence to the contrary. The next morning, I smiled and nodded as they moved my clothing, my books, my personal items to the basement. I thanked them for their thoughtfulness. I pretended not to notice when Justin's name suddenly appeared on a utility bill, or when Meredith started referring to our kitchen when, discussing the space I'd designed, I watched and waited, and I began to plan. First, I called my old Army friend Diane, now a real estate attorney in Vancouver. I explained the situation without emotion, just facts. She listened without interruption. "They haven't done anything illegal," she said finally. "The house is still in your name. But what they're doing is wrong, Sarah, and it's a pattern I've seen before." "What are my options?" I asked. "How attached are you to that house?" Her question was direct, Military straightforward. I thought about the magnolia tree, about the years of memories, but also about what the house had become. Not a sanctuary, but a battleground for my dignity. Less attached than I am to my self-respect, I answered. Good, Diane said. That gives us more options. Over the next few weeks, I created a record of everything. Photos of my belongings being moved without permission. Recordings of conversations about what's best for Mom held in my presence as if I weren't there. Copies of the construction contract I never signed. Bank statements showing my consistent payment of property taxes and insurance. I visited my doctor and had him document my physical capabilities, the progress I'd made in PT, my cognitive functioning, my independence in daily activities. I had my hearing tested again, results showing minimal impact on my overall communication abilities. I reconnected with my old unit's JAG officer, now in private practice, who reviewed my discharge papers and pension documentation. Everything was in order. I was not incompetent. I was not incapable. I was not in need of management. What happened next wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming command, a concept every service member understands. I met with 3 different real estate agents, finally choosing Maria Sanchez, a former Marine who specialized in quick sales for relocating military families. I explained my situation with the same precision I once used for mission briefings. You're sure? She'd asked after I signed the listing agreement. Once we go on the market, I'm sure, I had said, and I'd prefer my son and his wife not know until necessary. Maria had looked at me with understanding. Rules of engagement noted, Captain. The house went on the market on a Tuesday. By Friday, we had 6 offers, all above asking. I accepted one with a 30-day closing and a 2-week seller's rent back. Option. No contingencies. All cash. I didn't tell Justin or Meredith. Not yet. Instead, I began quietly sorting through what was truly mine, what mattered to me. My service medals, my father's pocket watch, photo albums from deployments, books that had traveled with me across continents. I secured a small storage unit and, when they were at work, moved these treasures there piece by piece. I waited until the paperwork was finalized, until the sale was officially in the closing process, with no turning back. The morning I decided to tell them, I woke early in my basement apartment. I could hear Meredith upstairs, the telltale sound of her expensive coffee grinder, the light tapping of her designer boots on my hardwood floors. Justin was probably still sleeping. He'd taken to late starts since his between jobs phase had stretched into its 8th month. There was a moment, brief but sharp, when I questioned what I was about to do. Was I being too harsh, too decisive? Then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard 3 nights earlier through the heating vent that connected the basement to the kitchen above. Once your mom's settled into her routine down there, Meredith had said, voice low but clear. We should talk about getting her to sign over the deed. It makes sense for estate purposes. Let's give it another month, Justin had replied. She's still adjusting to the basement. The real estate lawyer said we need to be careful about timing. They'd consulted a lawyer about my house, about transferring my deed without my knowledge. I showered in the accessible stall they'd insisted I needed, dressed in my crisp blue button-down and khakis, my meeting uniform from my Corps days, and made my way upstairs. My leg ached slightly, as it often did in the morning, but I didn't bring my cane. Not today. Meredith glanced up from her laptop at the kitchen island, surprise flickering across her face. Morning, Sarah. You're up early. Coffee? I nodded, settling myself at what had once been my breakfast table, now covered with Meredith's. Work papers and fabric swatches. She'd been talking about reupholstering my dining chairs. Is Justin up? I'd like to speak with both of you. Something in my tone must have alerted her. The same tone I'd used when junior officers had misallocated resources or filed incomplete reports. I'll get him, she said, setting down her mug with a small frown. 10 minutes later, Justin appeared in rumpled lounge pants and a faded tech company t-shirt, hair sticking up on one side. Meredith had changed from her robe to a casual sweater and leggings, her work from home but might have a Zoom outfit. I waited until they were both seated across from me. "I wanted to let you know that I've sold the house," I said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Justin blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear his vision. Meredith's mouth opened and closed twice before she found her voice. "You... what?" Her coffee mug was suspended halfway to her lips. "The house is sold," I repeated. "Closing is in 23 days. The new owners have agreed to a rent-back period of 2 weeks after that to allow adequate time for moving arrangements." Justin's face flushed red. "Mom, you can't just... this is our home." "No," I corrected gently. "It's my home. The deed is in my name. The mortgage was paid by me. The property taxes are my responsibility. But we've been living here for almost a year." Meredith's voice rose an octave. "We've invested in improvements." "Improvements I never requested," I reminded her. "Renovations started without my consent in a house owned solely by me." Justin ran his hands through his sleep-mussed hair. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We were trying to help you, to make things easier for you after your injury." "By moving me to the basement and planning to have me sign over my deed?" I asked quietly. Their faces told me everything. The sudden pallor of Meredith's cheeks, the way Justin's eyes darted away from mine. "I heard you," I continued, 3 nights ago, discussing the timing of getting me to sign over my property. Consulting with a real estate attorney without my knowledge. "That's not..." "We weren't," Justin stammered. "It was for estate planning," Meredith cut in smoothly. "For your protection. So you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and taxes as you get older." I almost admired her composure. Almost. "I'm 54, Meredith, not 84. I managed multiple infrastructure projects across 3 continents during my service. I believe I can handle property taxes." "Where will you go?" Justin asked, his voice smaller now. The same voice he'd used as a teenager when caught in a lie. "I've purchased a townhouse closer to the VA medical center. Single level, which actually will be easier on my leg. The sale of this house has left me with a significant profit, given the current market." "And us?" Meredith asked, her professional calm starting to crack. "What are we supposed to do? We can't find a rental with decent space in this market in 3 weeks." I looked at her steadily. "You've had nearly a year of rent-free living in my home while discussing how to take legal possession of it. I believe that's given you adequate time to prepare for your next steps." Justin slammed his palm on the table, coffee mugs jumping. "This is unfair. We've been taking care of you." "No," I said, maintaining my calm. "You've been managing me. There's a difference." I stood up, straightening, to my full height. Even with the slight list to my right from the titanium rod, I still carried the posture of my rank. "I've prepared folders for each of you," I continued, placing 2 manila envelopes on the table. "They contain the timeline for vacating the property, resources for short-term housing options in your price range, and the name of the moving company. I've arranged to help separate our belongings." "You planned all this behind our backs," Meredith said, voice tight with accusation. The irony was so thick I could almost touch it. "Yes," I acknowledged. "I did." The next 2 weeks were tense, to put it mildly. Justin vacillated between cold silence and emotional outbursts about family loyalty. Meredith took a more practical approach, suddenly concerned about which furniture was technically hers, which kitchen items she had purchased, how they would possibly manage the move timeline. I maintained my composure through it all, answering questions directly, providing necessary information, but offering no concessions on the timeline. I had learned long ago in the military that once a difficult decision is made, hesitation only prolongs the pain. 3 days after my announcement, my phone rang. My sister Rachel, calling from Phoenix. Justin called me, she said without preamble. He says you're having some kind of breakdown, selling the house out from under them, moving to some condo by yourself. I sighed. Townhouse, not condo, and I'm perfectly stable. Sarah, her voice softened with concern. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? Justin says you've been struggling since the injury. Memory issues, mood swings. Maybe this is something you should reconsider. A knot formed in my stomach. Of course they would try this angle. Discredit me. Question my competence. Rachel, I'm going to send you something, I said. Give me 20 minutes. I hung up and immediately composed an email with attachments. My recent medical evaluations, cognitive assessments from the VA, documentation of the basement renovation. I never approved, and recordings of Justin and Meredith discussing the deed transfer. 18 minutes later, my phone rang again. Those manipulative little... Rachel didn't finish the sentence. Sarah, I had no idea. Justin made it sound like you were incapable of caring for yourself. That's the narrative they've been crafting, I said, relief flooding through me at being believed. Slowly, carefully. The concerned son and daughter-in-law looking after the disabled veteran who can't manage on her own. But you commanded a unit in Iraq, for God's sake. Apparently that qualifies me less than Meredith's interior design certificate when it comes to deciding where I should live. Rachel was quiet for a moment. What can I do? Just believe me, I said, and maybe come help me move in a few weeks. The new place has a guest room with your name on it. Support came from unexpected quarters after that. My veterans writing group showed up on moving day, a cadre of former service members with bad knees, hearing aids, and the kind of efficiency that only military training can instill. They formed a human chain, boxing my belongings with precision, labeling everything with the same care they'd once used to organize field equipment. Maria, my realtor, stopped by with coffee and pastries for everyone. Staging the house was the easiest part of this job, she joked. The master bedroom cleared out so nicely once we explained the legal implications of impeding a property sale. She wasn't wrong. Once Justin and Meredith realized I had substantial documentation of their plans, and that my military connections included a formidable JAG officer willing to pursue elder abuse charges if necessary, they became remarkably cooperative about the move timeline. I won't pretend the process wasn't painful. Justin was my only child. I had raised him alone after his father left when he was 4, balancing deployments with parenthood, missing school plays but never birthday calls, no matter where I was stationed. I had believed we had a foundation of mutual respect. The afternoon, before I moved out, I found him in the backyard, staring up at the magnolia tree, now dormant for winter. I used to climb that when I was a kid, he said, not looking at me. You built me that platform on the bottom branch, remember? Said every engineer needed a good observation post. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. You read Hardy Boy's books up there, entire summers. I'm angry at you, he said, finally turning. His eyes were red-rimmed. I don't understand how you could do this. I know, I acknowledged. And someday I hope you'll try to understand how it felt to hear my son planning to take my home from me. To be treated as incapable in the space I created. He looked away again. That wasn't the intention. But intentions and impact are different beasts. I'd learned that lesson on my first deployment when a well-intended infrastructure project disrupted local commerce patterns. Good intentions don't negate harmful outcomes. I hope you and Meredith find a good place, I said finally. I've left you the contact information for my financial advisor. He can help you work out a mortgage plan when you're ready to buy. What I didn't say was that I'd already arranged for a portion of my VA benefits to be set aside in a savings account for Justin. Not for a house, but for therapy. Individual and couples counseling that might help him understand what had happened. Here, both his actions and mine. I had filed the paperwork with my attorney, accessible to him when he was ready. The day I moved into my new townhouse was unseasonably warm for November. My veterans group had insisted on handling everything, relegating me to a lawn chair with lemonade while they arranged furniture according to the floor plan I'd designed. Diana, my real estate attorney, stopped by with a housewarming gift, a custom door knocker shaped like an Army Corps of Engineers castle. "Figured you needed something to make it officially yours," she said, admiring the open floor plan and large windows that filled the space with light. "No basements in sight." "None. Needed," I agreed. My new home was smaller than the Craftsman, but thoughtfully laid out. A primary bedroom and office on the main floor, guest room upstairs for when Rachel visited, a small patio garden where I could plant herbs and flowers without the strain of a larger yard. Most importantly, it was entirely mine, purchased outright, with the proceeds from the house sale. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat in my new living room surrounded by unpacked boxes and the few pieces of furniture I'd chosen to keep. My service medals were already mounted on the wall above my desk, no longer hidden in basement storage totes, but displayed with the honor they deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "All settled in?" I looked around at the space I had chosen, designed for my needs without pretending they were limitations. A home where my autonomy wasn't up for debate. "Getting there," I texted back, "on my own terms." The morning sun streamed through the east-facing windows of my new townhouse, creating pools of golden light on the hardwood floors. 3 weeks had passed since the move, and I was just beginning to establish a rhythm in my new space. My coffee, maker, programmed to start brewing at 05:45 hours, the same time I'd woken for decades, had filled the kitchen with the rich aroma of dark roast. Military habits die hard, even in retirement. I moved through my stretching routine on the yoga mat I'd placed in the patch of morning sun. Physical therapy exercises had evolved into a more comprehensive regimen that kept the stiffness at bay. The titanium rod in my leg didn't limit me nearly as much as Justin and Meredith had implied with their basement accessibility modifications. A notification chimed on my phone, a reminder about today's appointment with Dr. Levinson at the VA. With my new place just 3 miles from the medical center, I could drive myself without the elaborate transportation negotiations that had become routine at the old house. "Mom," Justin would say, "just let me drive you. It's no trouble." But it was trouble when he'd show up 30 minutes late, when appointments had to be scheduled around Meredith's Zoom calls, when every ride came with commentary about how challenging it must be for me to remember all my medications and appointments. Showered and dressed, choosing an emerald green blouse that Rachel had insisted brought out the gold flecks in my hazel eyes. My civilian wardrobe had expanded since retirement. No more uniform meant the freedom to discover my own style beyond regulation colors. Small pleasures that mattered more than I'd expected. The ring of the doorbell interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone this early. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery person holding a large arrangement of fall flowers. "Captain Mitchell?" she asked when I opened the door. "Yes, that's me." She handed me the bouquet, a striking arrangement of burgundy dahlias, orange lilies, and copper-colored roses in a simple ceramic vase. "These are for you. Have a great day, ma'am." I thanked her and carried the flowers to my kitchen counter, searching for the card. It was small and cream-colored, the handwriting immediately familiar. "Sarah, congratulations on your new home. I hope it brings you peace. Marcus Rivera, my former XO during my final deployment, now a full colonel stationed at the Pentagon." We'd kept in loose contact over the years, holiday cards and occasional emails about mutual colleagues. He'd visited once after my medical retirement, bringing Thai food and war stories that made me laugh until my sides ached. I hadn't told him about the move or the situation with Justin. The veteran's grapevine must be working overtime. I placed the arrangement on my dining table where the morning light caught the deep reds and oranges of the blooms. Something about the gesture warmed me, not just the flowers themselves, but being seen by someone who knew me as Captain Mitchell, not as Justin's mother or the injured veteran needing management. After my VA appointment, routine, nothing remarkable. Except the doctor's comment about my improved blood pressure readings. I stopped at a cafe near the medical center. It had become part of my new routine, this small indulgence of a proper cappuccino and 30 minutes with a book between appointments. Captain Mitchell. The greeting came from behind me as I stood in line. I turned to find Elena Vasquez, who'd served under my command in my second deployment. She was in civilian clothes, her dark hair now styled in a short bob instead of the tight bun I remembered. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I replied, smiling. Though I suppose it's just Elena now, she grinned. Actually, it's Lieutenant Vasquez still. National Guard these days. Part-time service, full-time civilian engineer with the city. We caught up over coffee, the conversation flowing easily, as it often does between those who've shared the particular pressure cooker of deployment. Elena had gotten married, had a 7-year-old daughter, was managing stormwater projects for Portland's infrastructure division. I heard you moved, she said, stirring her latte. The Veterans Housing Project Committee was buzzing about it at the last meeting. I nodded, unsurprised that word had spread. New place closer to the VA. Single level, more manageable. Elena studied me with the directness I'd always appreciated from her. That's the public version. I'm guessing there's more to it? Something about her straightforward question, without the concerned head tilt that had become so familiar from civilian friends, loosened the knot I hadn't realized I was carrying. My son and his wife moved me to the basement of my own house. I said simply. Decided what was best for me without asking. So I sold it and bought something that was actually my choice. Elena didn't look shocked or concerned. She nodded, a flash of recognition crossing her face. My tia went through something similar with my cousins. They moved into her house to help after her stroke. 2 months later, they were renovating her bedroom into a home theater and had her sleeping in what used to be a storage room. What happened? She called my mom at 2 a.m., said she needed an extraction. Mom and I showed up the next day with a U-Haul and 3 of my National Guard buddies. We had her out and installed in my parents' guest house by dinner. Elena laughed. My cousins didn't speak to us for 8 months. Best 8 months of family gatherings ever. I found myself laughing too, the kind of laughter that comes from recognition, from finding someone who understands without needing every detail explained. I haven't heard from Justin in 3 weeks, I admitted. Not since moving day. Elena's expression softened slightly. That part's hard, no matter how justified you are. It is, I agreed. But the alternative was worse. Living under siege in your own home? Yeah, I'd say so. She glanced at her watch. I've got to run to a meeting, but we should get together. A bunch of us from the old unit meet for dinner once a month. Next one's Thursday at Ricardo's. You should come. I hesitated only briefly. During the year with Justin and Meredith, my social connections had gradually frayed. Evening plans became complicated when they involved arranging transportation or dealing with subtle commentary about my energy levels. I'd like that, I said finally. Text me the details? As Elena left, I realized I was smiling. A genuine smile that reached my eyes, not the careful, measured expression I'd maintained through months of basement exile. Back at my townhouse, I found myself drawn to the spare bedroom I'd set up as an office. The walls were the same warm ivory as the rest of the place, but I'd added touches of military precision, my service certificates framed in simple black, bookshelves organized by subject, a map with pins marking my deployment locations. I settled at the desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked in an empty email draft addressed to Marcus. I wanted to thank him for the flowers, to explain about the move without sounding bitter or victimized. Finding the right words proved challenging. Finally, I typed, Marcus, the flowers are beautiful, thank you. The new place suits me well. Would you have time for a phone call this week? It's been too long since we caught up properly. Simple. Direct. I hit send before I could overthink it. His response came faster than I expected, barely 20 minutes later. Sarah, good to hear from you. I'll be in Portland next Tuesday for a meeting at the Reserve Center. Dinner instead of a call? I found myself smiling at the screen. Marcus had always been efficient in communication, no wasted words. It was one of the traits that had made him an excellent XO. Tuesday works, I replied. Just let me know when and where. As I closed my laptop, the doorbell rang again. This time I found a familiar face on my front step. Rachel, my sister, luggage in hand, and a broad smile on her face. Surprise, she announced. I finished that consulting project early and thought I'd come see the new digs in person. I hugged her tightly, unexpectedly moved by her presence. Rachel and I had always been close, despite the geographic distance between Portland and Phoenix. She'd been my emergency contact during deployments, Justin's guardian in my will, the keeper of our family history after our parents passed. You should have told me, I said, taking her rolling suitcase. I'd have picked you up from the airport. She waved dismissively. And ruin the surprise? Not a chance. Besides, I'm perfectly capable of navigating a rideshare. She stepped into the foyer, looking around with evident approval. Oh, Sarah, this place is perfect for you. I gave her the tour, not that it took long in a 2-bedroom townhouse, ending in the guest room I'd prepared with her in mind, decorated in the southwestern colors she'd always favored. You expected me, she observed, noting the stack of her favorite novels on the nightstand. Hoped, rather than expected, I corrected. The guest room was always going to be yours when you visited. Later, over takeout Thai food at my dining table, Rachel updated me on her life. Her consulting business was thriving, her divorce finally finalized after 3 years of negotiations, her newfound passion for desert gardening. I listened, asking questions, enjoying the comfortable rhythm of conversation with someone who knew me completely. So, she said finally, setting down her fork. Justin still hasn't called? I shook my head. Radio silence. Meredith sent one text asking where I'd stored some serving platters she claims are hers. That's it. Rachel's mouth tightened. He's sulking. He's processing, I corrected, though I wasn't entirely convinced of the distinction. It's a lot to absorb. It's a lot that he created, Rachel pointed out. And Meredith, I still can't believe they tried to gaslight you about your own capabilities. The term gaslight had come up in my veterans support group too. Colonel Harris, now retired and walking with a more pronounced limp than mine, had nodded knowingly when I described how Justin and Meredith had gradually reframed my independence as stubbornness, my self-sufficiency as dangerous denial. Classic approach, Harris had said. Make you question your own judgment enough times. You start to believe their version instead of your own experience. I explained this to Rachel, who nodded vigorously. Exactly. It's insidious because it comes wrapped in concern. We're just worried about you, Mom. We're only trying to help, Mom. All while they're renovating your basement without permission. Her indignation on my behalf was both comforting and discomforting. Comforting to be believed, to have my experience validated. Discomforting to acknowledge the full reality of what my son had participated in. I keep wondering where I went wrong. With him, I admitted quietly. What I did that made him think this was acceptable. Rachel reached across the table and gripped my hand. Stop that right now, Sarah Mitchell. You did not raise Justin to behave this way. You modeled integrity, service, responsibility. Whatever's happening with him now, that's on him, not you. I squeezed her hand in return, grateful for her fierce certainty, even if I couldn't fully share it. Parenthood never really ends, nor does the sense of responsibility for how your child turns out, even when that child is 36 with graying temples and questionable judgment. Besides, Rachel continued, I've had my suspicions about Meredith's influence for years. She's not entirely to blame either, I said, feeling a strange need to be fair. Justin was a willing participant. Rachel sighed. True, but she certainly accelerated whatever entitlement issues were already there. She refilled our wine glasses. Enough about them for tonight. Tell me about your veterans group. And who sent those gorgeous flowers on the table? The change of subject was welcome. I told her about reconnecting with Elena, about the monthly dinners with former unit members I'd be attending, about Marcus's unexpected flowers and upcoming visit. Marcus Rivera? Rachel's eyebrows rose. The Marcus who sent you that ridiculous care package in Iraq with the tiny desk fan and the mystery novels? I smiled at the memory. The same. He's a full colonel now, working at the Pentagon. And he just happens to be visiting Portland next week? Her tone was teasing now, a welcome shift from the intensity of discussing Justin. For a legitimate military meeting, I clarified, feeling a warmth in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the wine. The dinner is just catching up with an old colleague. Mm-hmm. Rachel's smile turned knowing. An old colleague who sends surprise flower arrangements and arranges in-person dinners when a phone call would suffice. I changed the subject again, asking about her desert gardening projects, but Rachel's observation lingered. Marcus and I had always maintained a strictly professional relationship during our service together. Military regulations and my position as his commanding officer had ensured that. But there had been a comfort in our working dynamic, a mutual respect that had made us an effective leadership team. The next morning, Rachel insisted on making breakfast, her specialty southwestern frittata that filled the kitchen with the scent of roasted peppers and onions. As we ate, she outlined her plans for the week. I'm here until Sunday, but I don't expect you to entertain me every minute, she assured me. I brought work with me, and there's a coffee shop walking distance you recommended, right? I nodded. 3 blocks north. Excellent almond croissants. Perfect. I'll work there while you're at your appointments. But I was thinking, maybe we could look at paint samples for your living room? That white is a little stark. Under different circumstances, I might have bristled at the suggestion, too reminiscent of Meredith's constant home improvement proposals. But Rachel's approach was entirely different. She wasn't presupposing my needs or preferences, just offering a sisterly activity. I'd like that, I said. I was thinking a warm taupe for that main wall, something with depth. Rachel grinned. I knew it. You were already planning a color change? Planning? Yes, but not rushing. I gestured to the still unpacked boxes in the corner of the dining area. One project at a time. Speaking of projects, Rachel said, her tone shifting to something more hesitant. I've been thinking about making a change myself. Phoenix is getting too crowded, too expensive. Most of my consulting work is remote anyway. I set down my coffee mug, understanding immediately where she was heading. You're considering moving to Portland? She nodded. Not to intrude on your new life, but being here these last couple days, seeing how this place suits you, thinking about being closer to family. She trailed off. It's just an idea at this stage. I think it's a wonderful idea, I said, meaning it completely. Having you nearby would be a gift, Rachel, not an intrusion. The relief on her face was evident. Really? Because after everything with Justin, I worried you might want more space, not less. Justin tried to control my life under the guise of support, I explained. That's entirely different from having my sister nearby as actual support, as family who respects my autonomy. Rachel's eyes grew suspiciously bright. Well, that settles it then. I'll start looking at rental options while I'm here, just to explore the possibility. The prospect of having Rachel nearby lightened something in me that had been heavy since the confrontation with Justin. Family, real family, wasn't about ownership or control. It was about respect, support, and genuine care. Rachel had always understood that distinction, even if my son had lost sight of it. As we cleared the breakfast dishes, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. I expected it to be Elena with details about Thursday's dinner, but instead saw a name. That made my heart stutter slightly. Justin. I opened the message, conscious of Rachel watching my reaction closely. Mom, could we meet for coffee this week? just you and me. I've been doing some thinking." Rachel peered over my shoulder. No exclamation points or emojis. He must be serious. I stared at the screen, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it to maintain the protective distance I'd established. Another part, the mother part, seized on the possibility that he had genuinely reflected on his actions. "You don't have to decide right now," Rachel said gently. "Or you can say no entirely. That's allowed." I nodded, setting the phone down, without responding. "I know. I just need to think about it." "Fair enough," Rachel agreed. "In the meantime, how about we go find those paint samples? Focus on something constructive." As we headed out to the hardware store, I realized I was standing straighter, the perpetual tension in my shoulders noticeably reduced. Whatever came next with Justin, reconciliation, continued estrangement, or something in between, I would face it from a position of strength and clarity. From my own home, secured by my own decisions, surrounded by people who respected my capabilities rather than diminishing them. The hardware store's paint section offered a dizzying array of options. Rachel and I stood before a wall of color samples, deliberating between warm hearth, desert sand, and Stonington beige for my living room. Such a mundane activity, choosing paint colors, and yet it felt significant. Another decision that was wholly mine, another choice that reflected my preferences rather than someone else's idea of what was appropriate for me. "This one," I said finally, selecting a warm taupe with subtle golden undertones. "It'll catch the morning light beautifully." Rachel nodded approvingly. "Perfect choice. Warm without being too yellow, neutral without being boring." She tucked the sample card into her purse. "We can pick up the actual paint tomorrow after your appointment." As we walked out of the store, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I checked it out of habit. Another text from Justin. "Mom, please, just coffee. I understand if you're still upset." Rachel noticed my expression change. "Justin again?" I nodded, showing her the message. "Still upset," she repeated with a snort. "As if you're a child who didn't get the toy you wanted. Not a woman whose son tried to commandeer her home." I tucked the phone away without responding. "I'll decide later." But Justin's persistence continued throughout the afternoon. A third text arrived while Rachel and I were having lunch at a small bistro near my townhouse. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist. She's helping me understand some things. Please, Mom." This message gave me pause. Justin had always been resistant to therapy, even after his father left, when I'd suggested it might help him process the abandonment. He'd insisted he was fine, that talking about feelings was not his thing. "That's unexpected," I said, showing Rachel the latest text. She raised an eyebrow. "Could be genuine. Could be a tactic." "Cynical," I observed. "Realistic," she countered. "But if he is seeing someone, that's a positive step, regardless of whether you meet with him." I considered her words as we finished our meal. The possibility that Justin was genuinely reflecting on his behavior offered a glimmer of hope I hadn't allowed myself to indulge. But Rachel's caution resonated too. I'd been manipulated under the guise of concern before. The basement apartment hadn't started with a direct assault on my autonomy. It had begun with small suggestions, gentle nudges, ostensibly for my benefit. By evening, I'd made my decision. I texted Justin back. Thursday, 10 a.m. Blueprint Coffee. On Jackson Street. Just you, not Meredith. His response came immediately. "I'll be there. Thank you." "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked as we prepared dinner together in my new kitchen, the countertops at a height I could comfortably work at without the backache I'd developed using Meredith's ergonomic basement kitchenette. "No," I admitted, dicing an onion with the precision my old mess sergeant had instilled decades ago. "But I need to hear what he has to say, even if it's just to establish clearer boundaries." Rachel nodded, accepting my decision without further challenge. This, too, was refreshingly different from my recent experience with family, being trusted to know my own mind, to make my own choices without gentle redirection or concerned intervention. That night, after Rachel had gone to bed in the guest room, I sat on my small patio beneath a clear October sky. The air was crisp but not uncomfortable, especially with the soft throw I'd wrapped around my shoulders. My new townhouse complex was quiet, the sounds of the city muffled to a distant hum. I found myself thinking about Justin as a child, his curious mind, his infectious laugh, the way he'd looked up to me despite the challenges of having a mother who deployed. I'd missed birthdays and school plays, but I'd never missed sending him letters filled with stories and sketches from wherever I was stationed. He'd kept everyone in a shoebox under his bed. I wondered if he still had them. Where had it gone wrong? When had his concern for me twisted into something controlling? Had it started after my injury, or had the seeds been planted earlier? Had I somehow contributed to his belief that I needed managing? These questions circled in my mind without clear answers. But I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever path our relationship took from here, it had to be founded on mutual respect, not the paternalistic oversight he and Meredith had attempted to establish. Thursday morning arrived bright and clear. Rachel offered to come with me to the coffee shop, just to sit at another table as backup, but I declined. This is something I need to handle directly, I told her. Officer to soldier, so to speak. She smiled at the military reference. Roger. That, Captain. I'll be on standby if you need extraction. I dressed with care in black slacks and a burgundy sweater, my hair twisted into the neat chignon I'd worn throughout my service years. Professional, composed, in command. My uniform might be civilian now, but the bearing remained. Blueprint Coffee was moderately busy when I arrived at 9:55, exactly 5 minutes early. Another military habit. I selected a table near the window but away from the main flow of traffic. Good sightlines, defensible position. I ordered a cappuccino and settled in to wait. Justin arrived at 10:03, slightly flushed as if he'd been rushing. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him on moving day, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of poor sleep. He wore a button-down shirt rather than his usual t-shirt, an effort at formality that didn't go unnoticed. Mom, he said, hovering awkwardly before taking the seat across from me. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. You said you wanted to talk. I considered the question as I accepted the cup of tea she offered. Now we see if actions match words, if this new awareness translates to sustained respect for my autonomy. Rachel nodded approvingly. Exactly right. Trust but verify, as you military types say. Actually, that was Ronald Reagan about the Soviets, but the principle applies, I said with a smile. We spent the afternoon as planned, picking up the paint I'd selected and beginning the transformation of my living room. Rachel tied her hair back with a bandana and attacked the walls with surprising skill, while I handled the more detailed work around the trim and outlets. You know, Rachel said during a break, both of us admiring the first completed wall. There's something powerful about changing the color of your space, making it definitively yours. I understood exactly what she meant. Each brushstroke felt like a declaration. This is mine, this is my choice, this reflects my taste and no one else's. By evening, we'd completed the main living area. The warm taupe transformed the space, making it feel both more grounded and somehow more expansive. My few carefully chosen pieces of furniture, the ones I'd insisted on bringing from the old house, seemed to settle more comfortably against the new backdrop. As we cleaned brushes and replaced furniture, my phone chimed with a text alert. I checked it, half expecting another message from Justin, but instead found one from Marcus. Confirmed for Tuesday dinner. 7 p.m. at Amelia's on Taylor Street. They have a corner table that's quieter for conversation. Rachel peered over my shoulder unabashedly. Amelia's is that fancy Italian place, isn't it? With the handmade pasta and the wine cellar? I nodded, feeling a flutter of anticipation that took me by surprise. It's supposed to be excellent. And he already knows about the quiet corner table, Rachel observed with a meaningful look. He probably researched restaurant options before suggesting it, I said, deflecting her implication. Marcus was always thorough about logistics. Rachel's skepticism was evident. Just like he happened to have meetings in Portland. Right after you moved. I ignored her teasing and texted back a simple confirmation to Marcus, then set my phone aside. But Rachel's comments lingered in my mind as we finished cleanup and prepared a simple dinner. The truth was, I hadn't considered dating since my retirement. Between recovery from my injuries, establishing my new civilian identity, and then the gradual erosion of my independence under Justin and Meredith's management, romance had seemed like a distant, irrelevant concept. But now, in my new home, with my life reshaping itself according to my own design, the prospect of dinner with Marcus stirred something long dormant, a simple pleasure in being seen and appreciated by someone who knew my strength rather than focusing on my limitations. After dinner, Rachel and I sat in my newly painted living room, admiring how the color changed in the evening light. The conversation drifted to her potential move to Portland, neighborhoods she might consider, the logistics of her consulting business in a new location. There's a condo building just 2 streets over that has units coming available next month, I mentioned. Close enough for regular visits, far enough for privacy. Perfect, Rachel agreed. I'll call the leasing office tomorrow. The easy way. We navigated this potential change. Her move, our proximity, highlighted everything that had gone wrong with Justin's approach. Rachel asked questions, considered my input, respected my space. No assumptions, no decisions made on my behalf, no management disguised as care. Later, as I prepared for bed, I found myself standing before the mirror in my bathroom, really looking at myself for the first time in months. The silver threading through my dark hair, the laugh lines around my eyes, the slight unevenness in my stance from compensating for the titanium rod, all part of Captain Sarah Mitchell, U.S. Army, retired. A woman who had commanded respect in war zones, who had raised a son alone while serving her country, who had reclaimed her life when others tried to diminish it. I thought about the conversation with Justin, his recognition of how he'd forgotten who I really was. His words had resonated because I, too, had temporarily lost sight of my own strength during those months in the basement, had allowed myself to be redefined by others' perceptions of my limitations rather than my lifetime of capability. Never. Again, I said to my reflection, a quiet promise to myself. Whatever came next, reconciliation with Justin, dinner with Marcus, Rachel moving nearby, new connections with my veterans community, it would be on my terms, guided by my choices, in the home I had claimed for myself. Thursday evening found me at Ricardo's Bistro, surrounded by familiar faces I hadn't seen together in years. Elena had saved me a seat at the large round table where 6 other veterans from my former unit had already gathered. The restaurant hummed with conversation and clinking glasses, warm lighting casting a golden glow over the gathering. Captain. Mitchell? James Torres greeted me, rising slightly from his chair. He'd been a specialist under my command during my second deployment, now sporting a neatly trimmed beard and civilian clothes that couldn't quite disguise his military bearing. Just Sarah now, I reminded him with a smile. Save the captain, for formation. Old habits? He said with a shrug, pulling out my chair. Some things stick with you. Around the table sat men and women with whom I'd shared some of the most intense experiences of my life. Elena Vasquez, now a lieutenant in the National Guard. Miguel Suarez, who'd been my supply sergeant and now ran logistics for a shipping company. Kim Lowry, formerly my communications specialist, now teaching high school physics. Thomas Wright, who'd driven our convoy through an ambush and now worked as a commercial pilot. Jason Chen, once my junior engineer, now designing bridges for the State Transportation Department. And Daryl Jackson, who'd been a medic in our unit and now worked as a physician assistant. "The captain finally joins us," Daryl announced with a broad smile. "We've been trying to get you to these dinners for what, 2 years?" "Something like that," I acknowledged, settling into my seat. Life got complicated for a while. Elena, seated to my right, gave me a knowing look, but said nothing. She'd been the only one I'd shared my full situation with, but military networks being what they are, I suspected the others had heard at least parts of the story. "Well, you're here now," Kim said, raising her glass. "To reunions." We clinked. Glasses. And just like that, the years seemed to compress. These people knew me, really knew me, in a way that transcended the civilian world's perceptions. They'd seen me make life or death decisions under pressure, lead through chaos, maintain calm when everything was falling apart. To them, a titanium rod and some hearing loss didn't define me. They were footnotes, not the story. Conversation flowed easily through dinner, moving from personal updates to shared memories to good-natured arguments about who had actually been responsible for the generator disaster in Kandahar. Consensus eventually settled on a particularly unfortunate goat, absolving all human participants. He went to get his coffee first, returning with a plain black drip brew. No fancy concoctions for Justin, even though I knew he preferred lattes. Another small effort to present himself differently, perhaps. "I've been seeing Dr. Linden," he began, after taking a sip. "Twice a week for the past month." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, meaning it. "What prompted the decision?" He looked down at his mug. "After you left, after you sold the house, I was angry. Really angry. I told myself you were being irrational, ungrateful even." He glanced up quickly, gauging my reaction. I kept my face carefully neutral, though I felt a flicker of the old hurt at the word ungrateful. "Meredith was angry too," he continued. "She kept saying we'd done everything for you, that you'd betrayed us." He took a deep breath. "But then I found something while we were packing to move to our new apartment." "What was that?" I asked, curious despite myself. "My old shoebox, the one with all your letters from deployments." His voice grew quieter. I started reading them, again. Letters from Iraq, from Afghanistan. You wrote to me about building bridges under fire, coordinating with local leaders to restore infrastructure, managing teams in impossible conditions. I remembered those letters, written by flashlight in my tent, desperate to maintain a connection with my son across thousands of miles. And I realized, Justin continued, that I'd somehow forgotten who you are. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the woman who commanded respect from generals, who rebuilt roads while dodging sniper fire. He met my eyes directly now. "I started treating you like you were fragile after your injury, like the titanium in your leg somehow diminished the steel in your spine." The metaphor, unexpected from my practically minded son, caught me off guard. I took a sip of my cappuccino to cover the moment of emotion. "Dr. Linden helped me see that I'd been projecting," he said. "My fear of losing you, of you being injured, again turned into this need to control your environment, to keep you safe, even if it meant diminishing you." "And Meredith?" I couldn't help asking. Justin's expression tightened slightly. "That's more complicated. She had ideas about the house from the beginning, about our future there. I overheard you discussing getting me to sign over the deed," I said directly. He flinched. "Yes, that was wrong. Completely wrong. I can't justify it." "I'm not asking for justification, Justin. I'm trying to understand how my son became someone who would conspire to take my home." He was quiet for a long moment. "I think it started with genuinely wanting to help after your injury. The basement apartment really was meant to make things easier for you." He paused. "But then it shifted. Meredith started talking about the house as an investment, about how much equity you had in it, about how it made more sense for us to manage it long term since we were younger. And you agreed with this logic? I didn't disagree, he admitted. That's on me. I let the lines blur between helping you and helping ourselves to what was yours. He looked up, his eyes reddened. I'm not proud of that, Mom. Not at all. I took a measured breath, processing his words. There seemed to be genuine remorse there, a real recognition of the boundary violations. But trust, once broken, doesn't mend with a single conversation. Where do things stand with Meredith now? I asked. Justin's expression grew complicated. We're taking some space. She's staying with her sister while I'm in the apartment. The therapist suggested we step back and reassess some patterns. This was unexpected. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish personal hardship on either of them. Don't be, Justin said with surprising firmness. It's necessary, for both of us. Dr. Linden pointed out that our relationship has some unhealthy dynamics. The way we approached your situation was a symptom of larger issues. I nodded, uncertain what to say. This was a level of self-awareness I hadn't anticipated from my son. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued after a moment. Not yet. I haven't earned that. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on understanding what happened, why I participated in something that hurt you so deeply. I appreciate that, I said carefully. Self-reflection is important. I also wanted to ask. He hesitated. How are you? Really? The new place? Is it working out? The question seemed genuine, without the undertone of assessment I'd grown accustomed. It is, I answered. It suits me, single level by choice, not necessity. Close to the VA and my veterans groups, I'm establishing new routines. And Aunt Rachel? Mom mentioned she's visiting. She's considering moving to Portland, actually. We're exploring neighborhoods while she's here. Justin nodded. That would be good. Having family nearby. He caught himself. Not that you need looking after. Just connection. Connection is valuable, I agreed. When it's mutual and respectful. He absorbed this, turning his coffee mug slowly between his palms. Do you think, would it be possible to rebuild that kind of connection between us, eventually? I considered the question seriously. I don't know, Justin. Trust takes time to rebuild once it's broken. But I'm willing to see where this process leads you. Leads us both. Relief washed over his features. That's more than I hoped for, honestly. We talked for another 30 minutes, touching on neutral topics. His job search, going better now, with a promising lead at a tech firm downtown. My veterans writing group, Rachel's consulting business. It wasn't warm or intimate, but it was civil, respectful. A beginning, perhaps. As we prepared to leave, Justin asked hesitantly, Would it be okay if I called you sometimes? Not to check up on you, he added quickly. Just to talk. Like this. I nodded. That would be acceptable. But Justin, I added, my voice firming. I need absolute clarity that I make my own decisions about my life. My home, my health, my future. That's non-negotiable. I understand, he said soberly. Completely. We parted outside the coffee shop with an awkward half-hug, neither fully embracing nor completely distant. As I watched him walk toward his car, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Cautious hope for healing, lingering hurt from the betrayal, and a quiet pride in maintaining my boundaries even in the face of his apparent contrition. Back at my townhouse, Rachel was waiting expectantly, a pot of tea already brewed. Well, she asked as I hung up my coat. How did it go? I settled into my favorite chair before answering. Better than I expected, honestly. He's in therapy. He and Meredith are taking space. He acknowledged the wrong without making excuses. Rachel looked surprised. That's actually significant. I was prepared for manipulation or gaslighting. So was I admitted. But he seemed genuine. Said he'd been reading my old deployment letters and remembered who I really am. The captain who doesn't take nonsense from anyone, Rachel said, with a small smile. Something like that. So what happens now? Remember that time the captain negotiated with the local elder for bridge access? Miguel said, gesturing with his fork. 3 hours in that sweltering tent, drinking that tea that tasted like hot dirt. And walked out with not just access, but local support and labor, Jason added. That project finished 2 weeks early because of that negotiation. Sarah always did have a gift for getting people to see reason, Kim observed. Or making the unreasonable seem suddenly reasonable, Thomas added with a laugh. I found myself smiling at the memory. That negotiation had been challenging. Cultural differences, language barriers, complicated local politics. But I'd approached it with respect and determination. The same qualities that had served me throughout my military career and civilian life. The same qualities that had helped me navigate the situation with Justin and Meredith. How's the new place working out? Elena asked during a lull in the group, conversation keeping her voice low. Well, I replied. Really well. My sister's visiting, actually considering moving to Portland. Good backup, she approved. And your son? We met for coffee this morning. He's in therapy, seems to be developing some self-awareness about what happened. Elena nodded. That's something. Not everything, but something. Exactly what I thought. As dinner wound down, Daryl leaned across the table. Before we break up tonight, I wanted to mention something. The VA is looking for peer mentors for their Women Veterans program. Given your experience and rank, you'd be perfect, Sarah. Just a few hours a week, helping younger female vets navigate the system, transition to civilian life. The suggestion caught me by surprise. I hadn't considered anything like that. Maybe you should, Kim chimed in. You were the best commanding officer most of us ever had. Those skills translate. Plus, Elena added quietly, after what you've been through, you'd recognize the warning signs if someone's family was trying to take control. She had a point. My experience, though painful, had given me insight that might help others avoid similar situations. I'll think about it, I promised. As we settled the bill and prepared to leave, James mentioned casually, Same time next month, Captain. Sorry, Sarah. You'll join us again? I will, I said without hesitation. Definitely. Walking to my car. Afterward, I felt a lightness that had been absent for too long. The evening had reminded me of a fundamental truth I'd temporarily lost sight of. I wasn't defined by my injuries or limitations. I was the sum of my experiences, capabilities, and connections. The woman who'd led troops and managed million-dollar projects hadn't disappeared when I retired my uniform. She'd just been temporarily obscured by others' perceptions. The next morning, Rachel and I visited the condo building I'd mentioned. The leasing agent showed us a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor with a small balcony overlooking a community garden. I could work from that sunroom, Rachel mused as we toured the space. The light is perfect. And it's furnished, I pointed out. Makes the transition easier if you decide to go forward with this. After the tour, we sat at a nearby cafe discussing the practicalities. Rachel's business was entirely virtual now, her client meetings conducted over video calls. Her divorce was finalized, her Phoenix condo already on the market as part of that settlement. I'm ready for a change, she said, stirring her latte. And being close to you feels right, especially after everything that's happened. I'd love having you nearby, I told her honestly, just as long as you don't decide my house needs renovating without asking me first. She laughed. Fair enough. Though I make no promises about bringing over throw pillows occasionally. That living room could use some color accents now that the walls are done. Throw pillows I can handle, I conceded. as long as I get veto power. By the time Rachel left on Sunday afternoon, she'd submitted a rental application for the condo and scheduled a return visit in 3 weeks to sign paperwork and coordinate her move. We hugged tightly at the airport departure area, the kind of fierce embrace siblings share when they've weathered difficulties together. "Call me after your dinner with Marcus," she instructed as she pulled away. "I want to hear everything." "It's just catching up with an old colleague," I protested, but without much conviction. Rachel's knowing smile told me she wasn't fooled. "Just be open to possibilities, Sarah. That's all I'm saying." After seeing her off, I returned to my townhouse, which felt temporarily emptier without her presence. I spent the evening organizing my home office, hanging the last of my military certificates, arranging books on shelves, creating order as I'd always done when processing change. Monday brought a voicemail from the VA Medical Center. Dr. Reynolds, my primary care physician, wanted to discuss a new program opportunity. I returned the call during my lunch break from the veterans writing workshop I attended weekly. "Sarah," Dr. Reynolds greeted me warmly. "Thanks for getting back to me. I wanted to talk to you about our Women Veterans Health Initiative. We're expanding services, and I thought of you immediately." "In what capacity?" I asked, curious about the coincidental timing after Daryl's similar suggestion. "We're forming a patient advisory council to provide feedback on services, identify gaps, suggest improvements. Your background in leadership and project management would be invaluable. Plus," she added, "I understand you've had some personal experience with autonomy issues in health decision-making." I was silent for a moment, processing her words. "How did you know about that?" "Your file notes a significant change in living situation, and a request for updated contact information that bypassed your listed emergency contact. I've been doing this long enough to recognize potential red flags." Her perception impressed me. "You're right," I acknowledged. "It was a complicated situation, which makes your perspective particularly relevant. Many women veterans face challenges with family members who don't understand their capabilities or try to exert inappropriate control, especially after injuries. The parallels to my own experience were striking. When would this council meet? Monthly, for about 2 hours. There's a small stipend, though I know that's not your primary motivation. It's not, I agreed. Send me the details and I'll consider it seriously. After hanging up, I sat with the conversation for a while. 2 separate opportunities to use my experience to help other women veterans, both appearing within days of my reconnecting with my former unit. The timing felt significant, though I wasn't typically one for signs and omens. In the military, I'd learned that seemingly random events often revealed patterns when viewed with sufficient perspective. Perhaps this was the pattern emerging from the chaos of the past year, a new direction that honored my experience while creating something constructive from the difficulty. By Tuesday morning, I'd made my decision. I emailed Dr. Reynolds accepting the advisory council position and left a message for Daryl indicating my interest in the peer mentoring program. Both commitments were manageable alongside my writing group and physical therapy schedule, creating a balanced structure to my weeks. The day passed quickly as I attended a VA appointment, grocery shopped, and prepared for my dinner with Marcus. I found myself looking forward to the evening with an anticipation that surprised me. A flutter of nerves I hadn't experienced in years. I chose my outfit with particular care. A knee-length navy dress with 3/4 sleeves, simple but elegant. Professional enough not to suggest expectations, but definitely not my usual practical pants and sweater. I added pearl earrings that had been my mother's and a touch more makeup than I typically wore. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman transformed not by the clothes or makeup, but by the quiet confidence that had returned to her posture and expression. This was Captain Sarah Mitchell, ready to step forward rather than being pushed aside. Arrived at Amelia's precisely at 6:55, giving myself a moment to gather my thoughts before entering. The restaurant was housed in a renovated Victorian with high ceilings and warm brick walls, white tablecloths contrasting with dark wood furnishings. A host greeted me at the door. "I'm meeting Colonel Rivera," I said, the formal address feeling appropriate somehow. "Of course. He's already arrived. Right this way." The host led me to a corner table partially screened by a decorative wooden partition, creating a sense of privacy without isolation. Marcus rose as I approached, and I was struck by how little he had changed in the years since we'd served together. His dark hair showed distinguished silver at the temples, and fine lines fanned from the corners of his eyes, but his posture remained impeccable, his smile warm and genuine. "Sarah," he greeted me, stepping forward to clasp my hand. "It's good to see you." "You too, Marcus." I returned his smile, noting the slight hesitation before he released my hand. We settled at the table, a candle flickering between us, casting warm light across the scene. Marcus had already ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, which the server poured for us after I approved. "To reconnecting," Marcus said, raising his glass. "To good timing," I countered, touching my glass to his. The formality that might have lingered from our former command relationship dissolved quickly as we fell into conversation. Marcus updated me on his Pentagon role overseeing infrastructure projects in regions destabilized by climate change, work that built on his engineering background while adding new diplomatic dimensions. "Essentially, I'm doing what you pioneered. In Iraq," he acknowledged. "Building relationships first, then actual structures." "You always understood that approach," I reminded him. "Even when others wanted to bulldoze through local concerns," he smiled. "I had a good commander who emphasized respect for local knowledge." I found myself relaxing into the evening, enjoying the easy flow of conversation with someone who shared so many reference points. We ordered dinner, handmade pasta with seafood for me, osso buco for him, and continued catching up on mutual acquaintances and career trajectories. It was only after our main courses were cleared that Marcus shifted the conversation to more personal territory. "I heard from Elena about your recent move," he said carefully. "She mentioned some difficulties with your son." I appreciated that he didn't pretend not to know. Military networks were efficient information channels, especially among officers who had served together. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," I acknowledged. "My son and his wife decided I needed managing after my injury. Relocated me to my own basement without my full consent." Marcus's expression darkened. "That's completely inappropriate." "Hence the new townhouse and the flowers you sent," I said, with a small smile. "Which were lovely, by the way. Thank you." "You're welcome." He hesitated briefly. "I wanted to acknowledge your new start, and selfishly, to have a reason to reconnect." The candid admission surprised me. "The reconnection is welcome," I said honestly, "especially now." "How are you really doing with everything?" he asked, his dark eyes serious. Beyond the professional update, I considered my answer carefully. Initially, I was hurt, betrayed, angry that my son could see me as diminished rather than simply dealing with a physical challenge. I paused. But now, I'm finding that reclaiming my life has been unexpectedly invigorating. I'm remembering who I am beyond the roles of mother or injured veteran. Marcus nodded. "I always thought one of your greatest strengths as a commander was your ability to adapt without losing your essential nature." "Sounds like that's serving you well now." "It is," I agreed, though I had a temporary lapse when I allowed myself to be relegated to the basement. "Temporary is the key word," he pointed out. "You recognized what was happening and took decisive action. That's the Sarah Mitchell I remember." The use of my first name, spoken with such warmth, created a moment of connection that transcended our professional history. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that this dinner might be more than a collegial reunion. "What brings you to Portland regularly?" I asked, steering the conversation slightly. "You mentioned meetings at the Reserve Center." "I'm Overseeing a new training program for engineers deploying to climate disaster zones, he explained. Portland is one of 3 pilot locations. I'll be here every few weeks for the next 6 months at least. Convenient timing, I observed with a slight smile. Fortuitous, he countered, holding my gaze, though I would have found reasons to visit regardless. The directness of his response sent a pleasant warmth through me that had nothing to do with the wine. After decades of military precision and the recent months of carefully measuring my words with Justin and Meredith, there was something refreshing about such straightforward communication. "I'd like that," I said simply. As the evening progressed to dessert, a shared tiramisu that arrived without either of us actually ordering it, courtesy of a server who apparently recognized a connection, Marcus asked about my plans now that I was settled in my new place. I told him about the VA Advisory Council and the peer mentoring program, about my writing group and the possibilities those connections were creating. "I'm actually considering compiling a guidebook," I explained, surprising myself with the admission. It was an idea that had been percolating, but that I hadn't articulated until this moment. For women veterans transitioning to civilian life, not just the practical aspects, but maintaining autonomy when well-meaning family members try to help in ways that undermine independence. "That sounds incredibly valuable," Marcus said, genuine interest in his expression. "The military prepares us for so many challenges, but that particular one isn't covered in any training I've seen." "Exactly. We learn to face enemy fire, but not how to handle a son who decides your judgment is compromised because you stumbled on the stairs once." Marcus reached across the table, his hand coming to rest lightly on mine. "If you decide to pursue that project, I'd be happy to help connect you with resources through the Pentagon's Veterans Affairs Liaison." The offer was professional on its face, but the touch conveyed something more personal. I turned my hand slightly, allowing our fingers to interlace briefly. "I'd appreciate that," I said, not pulling away. When the check arrived, Marcus insisted on paying despite my protest. "You can get the next one," he said with a confidence that assumed there would be a next time. The presumption should have bothered me after my recent experiences with assumptions about my life, but instead, I found it pleasantly anticipatory. Outside the restaurant, the October evening had turned cool, stars visible in the clear sky above Portland's city lights. Marcus walked me to my car, his pace automatically adjusting to match mine without any awkward hovering or obvious accommodation for my slight limp. "This was wonderful," he said as we reached my vehicle. "I've missed our conversations." "So have I realized aloud. More than I recognized until tonight." He stepped slightly closer. "I'll be back in Portland on the 14th. Would you be interested in continuing this then? Perhaps dinner at your new place? I'm a decent cook when I have access to a kitchen." The invitation was clear in its intent, more personal than a restaurant, a step towards something beyond friendship but without pressure. I found myself nodding. "I'd like that," I said. "Fair warning, though, my kitchen is still being organized." "All the more reason to let someone else cook in it," he replied with a smile. Then, with a gentleness that respected boundaries while clearly indicating interest, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Good night, Sarah. I'll call you before my next visit." "Good night, Marcus." As I drove home, I felt a lightness that had nothing to do with duty or obligation or proving my capabilities. This was something else entirely. The simple pleasure of connection with someone who saw me clearly, who valued my strength rather than focusing on my challenges. Pulling into my townhouse driveway, I noticed that one of my neighbors had left, the porch light on for me, a small courtesy that spoke of community forming. Inside, my newly painted living room welcomed me with its warm tones. I moved through the space, turning on lamps, creating pools of gentle light that made the house feel like a sanctuary. I texted Rachel a brief update. Dinner was lovely. Details when we talk tomorrow. knowing she'd be waiting impatiently for news despite the late hour in Phoenix. Then I prepared for bed, moving through my evening routine with a contentment that felt both new and familiar. Standing before my bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. The same silver-threaded dark hair, the same laugh lines and evidence of years lived fully. But there was something different in my eyes now. A clarity, a certainty, a reclamation of self that had been temporarily obscured but never truly lost. "Captain Mitchell," I said softly to my reflection, "reporting for duty." Not military duty anymore, but the equally important duty of living authentically, on my own terms, in spaces I had chosen. The basement was behind me now, both literally and figuratively. Ahead lay possibilities I was finally ready to explore, not as someone's mother or patient or burden, but as myself. Whole and undiminished, regardless of titanium rods or hearing loss, or the challenging path that had led me here. I slept deeply that night, without the hypervigilance that had characterized my rest in the basement apartment. In my own bedroom, in my own home, secured by my own decision-making, I found a peace that had eluded me for months. Whatever came next, with Justin, with Marcus, with my new veterans advocacy roles, I would face it standing firmly on ground of my own choosing. November brought a crisp clarity to Portland, sharp blue skies interspersed with classic Pacific Northwest rainfall. I settled into patterns in my new home, establishing rhythms that reflected my preferences rather than someone else's idea of what I needed. Morning coffee on my small patio when weather permitted, PT exercises in the patch of sunlight that warmed, my living room floor, veterans writing group on Mondays, VA appointments streamlined now that I lived closer to the medical center. My first meeting with the Women Veterans Advisory Council proved more engaging than I'd anticipated. 8 of us gathered in a conference room at the VA hospital. 3 Gulf War-era veterans, 2 from Vietnam, and 3 from post-9/11 operations. Dr. Reynolds facilitated, but it quickly became clear that she expected us to drive the agenda. This council exists because women veterans have unique needs that often go unaddressed, she explained. You're the experts on what those are and how we can better meet them. Leah Johnson, a former Army helicopter pilot who'd served in Afghanistan, spoke up first. Childcare during appointments would be transformative. I've had to cancel 3 times this year because my babysitter fell through. Nods around the table. I hadn't faced that particular challenge as a mother, having navigated single parenthood during an earlier era with different support systems, but I recognized the logistics problem immediately. The VA has space in the West Annex that's underutilized, I offered. Could be renovated for a drop-in childcare center staffed by volunteers or part-time professionals. Dr. Reynolds made a note. That's exactly the kind of specific suggestion we need. Space allocation I can work with. The meeting continued with similar practical discussions: pharmacy wait times, privacy concerns during check-in, the need for more female providers. I found myself automatically mapping problems to potential solutions, the same way I'd approached infrastructure challenges during my service. Captain Mitchell has the right approach, Teresa Nguyen, one of the Vietnam-era nurses, commented. We need to frame these as solvable problems, not just complaints. Just Sarah now, I reminded her gently. Though the problem-solving mindset does stick with you. Once a captain, always a captain in how you think, she replied with a knowing smile. That's a good thing. We need that kind of leadership. By the meeting's end, we had identified 3 priority initiatives for the coming year: the childcare solution, expanded mental health services specifically addressing military sexual trauma, and a mentorship program connecting women veterans across generations. I'd like to head up the mentorship initiative, I volunteered, thinking of Daryl's invitation to be a peer mentor. It aligns with some other work I'm considering. Perfect, Dr. Reynolds agreed. I'll email everyone the notes and action items. Let's reconnect in 4 weeks. As we dispersed, Leah fell into step beside me in the hallway. "Some of us usually grab coffee after these meetings," she said. "You're welcome to join." I checked my watch. No other commitments pressed. I'd like that. Over coffee at the hospital cafe, conversation shifted from VA concerns to personal updates. I found myself sharing abbreviated versions of my recent experiences: the basement apartment, the house sale, the new townhouse. "Wait," Leah interrupted, her expression darkening. "Your son tried to move you to the basement without your full consent?" "While planning to get me to sign over the deed eventually," I confirmed, "all under the guise of helping after my injury." Teresa shook her head. "That happened to my sister, not a veteran, but similar situation after her stroke. Her daughter and son-in-law moved right in, started managing everything from her finances to her medication." "What did she do?" I asked. "Nothing," Teresa said grimly. "She didn't have your military training or backbone. She's still living in a converted sunroom of her own house while they occupy the master bedroom. Keeps apologizing for being a burden, when she built that house with her own teacher's salary over 30 years. The story hit close to home, illuminating what might have happened had I not recognized the pattern and taken decisive action. "That's why this mentorship program matters," I said. "Women veterans have unique strengths, but we're not immune to cultural pressures about aging and gender. We need to support each other in maintaining the autonomy we fought for." Heads nodded. Around the table. "You should talk to Diane Mercer at the Women's Legal Clinic," Leah suggested. "They're developing resources specifically for female veterans facing housing and autonomy issues." I made a note of the name. "I will, thanks." By the time I left the coffee gathering, I'd collected 3 phone numbers and commitments to connect about the mentorship program. The sense of purpose that had begun to crystallize since selling my house was gaining momentum, each conversation revealing new possibilities for channeling my experience into something constructive. That evening, I received a text from Justin. "Checking in. How are you settling into the new place?" I considered my response carefully. Our coffee meeting had been a positive step, but trust rebuilds slowly. "Well," I texted back. "Getting involved with veterans programs at the VA. Rachel is planning her move to Portland." His reply came quickly. "That's great about Aunt Rachel. I'm glad you'll have family nearby." The subtext was clear. He recognized that he had compromised his position as reliable family. The acknowledgement, indirect but evident, seemed significant. "How are you?" I asked, extending the conversation tentatively. "Managing. Started the new job last week, still doing therapy twice weekly. Meredith and I are officially separated." The news gave me pause. Despite everything I hadn't wished for, the dissolution of his marriage. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied honestly. "It's necessary," came his response, echoing what he'd said at our coffee meeting. "Dr. Linden is helping me see patterns I need to address. Patterns that affected how I treated you." I set the phone down for a moment, processing his words. Whatever issues existed between Justin and Meredith, it seemed he was genuinely working to understand his role in what had happened with me. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was movement in a healing direction. "I hope the therapy continues to be helpful," I texted finally. "Take care of yourself, Justin." "You too, Mom." The exchange left me thoughtful. Parental love never truly disappears, even when deeply wounded by betrayal. I still wanted good things for my son, just not at the expense of my own autonomy and dignity. Wednesday morning brought unexpected news via email. My Veterans Writing Group facilitator, Michael Chen, had submitted some of our work to a literary journal focusing on military experiences. My piece about building a bridge in Fallujah while negotiating with local leaders had been accepted for publication. "Congratulations, Sarah," Michael wrote. "Your perspective on infrastructure as peacekeeping is compelling and fresh. The editors, specifically mentioned the technical knowledge balanced with cultural sensitivity. They'd like to include it in their spring issue. A warm sense of accomplishment spread through me. Writing had become an important outlet since retirement, a way to process experiences and preserve memories that deserve documentation. Having my work recognized by editors validated that these stories mattered beyond my personal reflection. Printed the acceptance email and pinned it to the corkboard in my office, a tangible reminder that I was creating new achievements in this chapter of life, rather than just reminiscing about past ones. The week continued with similar small but significant steps forward. I met with Daryl about the peer mentoring program and committed to working with 2 recently discharged women veterans who were struggling with the transition to civilian life. I researched the women's legal clinic Leah had mentioned and scheduled an appointment to discuss potential collaborations. By Friday, I'd begun organizing notes for the guidebook idea that had crystallized during my dinner with Marcus. Working. Title: Standing Your Ground, a field manual for women veterans navigating civilian life. The military framing felt right, approaching the challenges of aging, health issues, and family dynamics as tactical situations requiring strategy rather than surrender. The doorbell rang as I was outlining a chapter on financial independence. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery person with another floral arrangement, smaller than Marcus's previous gesture, but featuring the same deep burgundy and copper tones. The card read simply, "Looking forward to the 14th. I arranged the buy, flowers on my kitchen counter, smiling at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Our dinner was still a week away, but the anticipation was pleasant, a brightness on the horizon that had nothing to do with obligation or caregiving or managing perceptions. Phone rang just as I was setting the vase in place. Elena's name flashed on the screen. "Sarah," she greeted me warmly. "How are you settling in?" "Well," I told her. "Very well, getting involved at the VA, working on some writing projects." "Good. Listen, a few of us are having a small gathering. Tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just dinner at my place. Thomas is grilling if weather permits. Otherwise, I'm making my grandmother's enchiladas. You should join us." The invitation was casual but sincere. "I'd like that. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself. And maybe that bourbon you used to keep for special occasions if you still have it." I laughed. "I do, actually. Survived the move. Intact. Perfect. 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address." After hanging up, I realized how much my social calendar had expanded in the weeks since moving. From the isolation of the basement apartment, where each outing required negotiation and explanation, to this, dinner with Marcus planned, an evening with former unit members tomorrow, the writers group on Monday, the VA Council ongoing. Connections. Reforming like muscle tissue after injury, strengthening with each interaction. I spent Saturday morning at the farmers market that operated year-round near my townhouse complex. The November offerings were different from summer's abundance, but no less appealing. Root vegetables in earth-tone displays, winter greens, apples in varieties I'd never encountered during deployments, artisanal breads and local cheeses, selected carrots with feathery tops still attached, purple potatoes, a crusty loaf of sourdough, and a small jar of blackberry jam made by a veteran-owned business whose card I tucked away for future reference. The simple pleasure of choosing food without commentary, without Meredith's pointed suggestions about easier-to-digest options, or Justin's concerns about whether I could carry the bags, felt luxurious. A light rain began as I was walking home, but I didn't rush. My weatherproof jacket kept me dry, and the gentle percussion of raindrops against the hood created a soothing rhythm. I'd spent too many years in dust-choked landscapes to resent Portland's moisture. Besides, the titanium rod in my leg ached less in damp weather than in dry. A counterintuitive benefit the doctors hadn't mentioned, but that I'd discovered through experience. At home, I prepared a simple lunch of soup and bread, then spent the afternoon finalizing the outline for my guidebook and researching publishers that specialized in veterans' issues. The project was taking shape more quickly than I'd anticipated, energy flowing into it from multiple sources, my own experience, conversations with other women veterans, the patterns emerging from these interactions. By early evening, it was time to prepare for Elena's gathering. I showered and changed into dark jeans and a deep green sweater, comfortable but presentable. The bourbon, a small batch variety I'd discovered during my final posting, was wrapped carefully in tissue paper and placed in a gift bag. Elena's home was a charming bungalow in a neighborhood not far from my old house. The sound of laughter greeted me before I even rang the bell. Thomas answered the door, apron still on from grilling duty. "Captain," he exclaimed, then caught himself. "I mean, Sarah, come in. Weather cooperated enough for steaks after all." Inside, I found a gathering smaller than our restaurant reunion but no less welcoming. Elena and her husband Robert, Thomas and his partner David, and Kim with her teenage daughter Zoe, who was visiting colleges in the area. "Sarah," Elena greeted, me with a quick hug. Perfect timing. Robert just opened the wine. The evening unfolded with the easy camaraderie of people who shared significant history. Conversation flowed from family updates to current projects to good-natured debates about which deployment had featured the worst food. Consensus eventually favored the mysterious meat stew outside Mosul in 2009. After dinner, as we settled in Elena's living room with coffee and the bourbon I'd brought, the conversation turned more reflective. "I've been thinking about what makes the transition to civilian life so challenging," Kim said, swirling the amber, liquid in her glass. "It's not just the structure or the clear chain of command that we lose, it's the shared purpose." "The mission," Thomas agreed. "Even on the worst days, we knew why we were there, what we were working toward. That's what I'm trying to recapture with this Women Veterans Initiative," I admitted, "finding a mission that matters in this new context." Elena nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. We need meaningful objectives, not just activities to fill time. And people who understand the context we're coming from," Thomas added, "like this group." "Speaking of understanding," Elena said, a slight smile playing at her lips, "how was dinner with Colonel Rivera?" I felt a warmth rise in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the bourbon. "Lovely. We're having dinner again next week." "At a restaurant?" she pressed, her eyes twinkling. "At my place, actually. He's cooking." This announcement was met with raised eyebrows and knowing smiles around the room. "Marcus Rivera always was efficient with his tactical approaches," Thomas commented with a grin. The teasing was gentle, good-natured, the kind that comes from people who care about your happiness rather than those looking to manage your choices. I found myself smiling in response. "He's been very respectful," I said, taking things at an appropriate pace. "As he should," Elena affirmed. "But Sarah, it's good to see you open to possibilities. After what you've been through with your son and daughter-in-law." "That situation is evolving," I said. "Justin is in therapy, recognizing patterns. We're communicating cautiously." Kim nodded approvingly. "Boundaries first, then gradual reconnection if earned. That's healthy." "That's military," Thomas corrected. "Clear parameters for engagement, defined expectations for behavior, consequences for violations." Sarah's applying tactical thinking to personal relationships. "Is that a criticism?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Not at all," he assured me. "It's what makes you effective. You've always had that ability to apply strategic principles to human situations." The observation resonated. Throughout my career, I'd approached engineering challenges and personnel issues with the same methodical problem-solving. Assess the situation, identify resources, determine constraints, develop options, implement solutions, evaluate outcomes. Now, I was applying that framework to rebuilding my life after the basement experience. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Elena pulled me aside briefly. "I hope you don't mind me mentioning Marcus," she said. it just seems like positive timing. You reclaiming your space, him reaching out, both of you at points in your lives with new possibilities. I don't mind, I assured her. It is good timing, though I'm proceeding carefully. She squeezed my arm gently. Of course you are. You're Sarah Mitchell. Thorough assessment before action is your hallmark. I drove home through light rain, streetlights, reflecting on wet pavement, feeling a contentment that had been absent during my months in the basement. The evening had reinforced what I was beginning to rebuild, a community of people who saw me clearly, who understood both my strengths and challenges, without defaulting to assumptions about what I needed. Sunday morning brought another text from Justin. Would you be open to having lunch next weekend? Saturday, maybe? I considered the request. Our coffee meeting had gone well, but extending to a meal represented another step in rebuilding contact. Was I ready for that? The question itself represented progress. I was evaluating based on my own readiness, not on obligation or his expectations. Saturday lunch would work, I replied after consideration. Riverfront Cafe at noon? Perfect, he responded. Thank you. The simple expression of gratitude suggested he understood that my agreement wasn't automatic or obligatory. Another small indication that his therapy might be yielding genuine insights. Later that day, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Reynolds at the VA. The subject line read, Opportunity to share your story. Sarah, she wrote, the regional VA leadership is organizing a symposium on women veterans' needs for March. Given your recent contributions to the Advisory Council and your background, would you consider being a panelist? The focus is on maintaining independence and dignity throughout the lifespan, with particular emphasis on transitions following service-connected injuries. Your perspective would be invaluable. The invitation both surprised and intrigued me. Public speaking had been part of my role as an officer, but always in a clearly defined military context. This would be different, more personal, drawing on experiences I was still processing. Yet the topic resonated deeply with the guidebook I was developing and the mentorship program I was helping shape. Perhaps sharing my story more broadly could serve others facing similar challenges. I drafted a response accepting the invitation, specifying that I would focus on strategies for maintaining autonomy while accepting necessary support. The delicate balance I was still navigating myself. As the week progressed toward Marcus's visit, I found myself preparing with a pleasant anticipation. I cleaned the townhouse thoroughly on Thursday, then shopped for essentials he might need for cooking: olive oil, fresh herbs, good quality salt. The kitchen was fully functional but still sparsely equipped, as I'd kept only the items I truly used from the old house. Friday evening, my phone rang with Marcus's number. Sarah, he greeted me warmly. Just confirming for tomorrow. Is 6 still good for you? Perfect, I assured him. I'm looking forward to it. As am I. There was a smile in his voice. Any food allergies or strong preferences I should know about? None. I'm adventurous with food. Excellent. I have something special planned. See you tomorrow. After we hung up, I realized I was smiling at the phone like a much younger woman. The feeling was unexpected, but not unwelcome. A reminder that life continues to offer new beginnings at every stage. I spent Saturday morning attending to final preparations. Fresh flowers for the dining table, not roses or anything too suggestive, just cheerful autumn blooms, wine breathing in the kitchen, comfortable but attractive casual wear selected for the evening. At precisely 6, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing on my front step, grocery bags in hand, his expression a mixture of confidence and anticipation that mirrored my own feelings. I opened the door, welcoming him into my new home, a space that represented not just a dwelling but a reclamation, a place where I made the decisions, where my preferences mattered, where no one's judgment superseded my own. It's good to see you, Sarah, he said, stepping inside. His gaze took in the space approvingly. Your new home suits you perfectly. It does, I agreed, closing the door behind him. It's exactly what I chose for myself. The emphasis wasn't lost on him. He nodded understanding as he followed me to the kitchen, where new possibilities were already beginning to take shape as Marcus set down his groceries on my kitchen counter. I caught a glimpse of the future I was building, one entirely of my own design. The basement was now just a memory, a chapter closed. I've learned something important, I said as we stood, in my kitchen, the evening light casting a warm glow across the room. Our strength isn't measured by never needing help. It's about choosing who helps us and how. Marcus smiled, understanding in his eyes. And having the courage to reclaim your ground when those boundaries are crossed. Exactly. 8 months later, my guidebook, Standing Your Ground, was published, helping countless women veterans navigate similar challenges. Justin and I rebuilt our relationship on new terms, with clear boundaries and genuine respect. Rachel settled 3 streets away, close but never intrusive. And Marcus became a permanent fixture in my life, proving that new beginnings happen, at any age. The basement they moved me to, for my own good, became the catalyst for a life more authentic and fulfilling than I could have imagined. If you've ever had someone try to diminish you under the guise of helping, remember my story. You always have the power to reclaim your space, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and reclamation. Where are you watching from? Share your own comeback stories in the comments below.